Welcome to the Kennel Connection webinar on business info, system options, and lists. Today's webinar is going to be going over basic aspects of setting up Kennel Connection, and that's going to include the business info, system options, and list sections in the setup section. To access that, we're going to go to the top of Kennel Connection, and under the File tab in the ribbon, we're going to go to the Setup section. First, we're going to enter the business info section. As implied by the name, this is where you're going to end up setting some of your basic business information. Under the General tab here, under Business Information, you're going to find your business name, as well as your address, phone number, email, web address. Your business name will, as you can see, is grayed out here. That is registered into the program when you purchase and register the program. Any changes to the business name have to be done through the sales office of Blue Crystal Software. So you want to contact them directly, as that directly correlates to licensing and our tracking of your information in the system. Another thing to keep in mind is the email address here. Whatever email address you put here should be the main email address for your company, as well as the email address you'll be using to send emails through Kennel Connection if you do use that aspect of the program. You can choose your country as well. And then below that, we have our tax information. We have 2 slots for taxes in case you have 2 tax rates, like a local and a state. If you do not, you can simply just use one of the tax windows. Below the tax settings, we have cumulative tax included in price and single tax only. Do not check any of these boxes unless you specifically know that you need to do so for your specific tax situation. Specifically, the single tax only does not mean that you need to check this box if you only have 1 tax. That's a different setting regarding having 2 taxes and including them as a single tax. And then we have a number of decimal places. I don't know anybody who doesn't use 2, but 2, you can change that here if 2 is not the amount of decimals you'd like. Next to that, we have the option to set up operating hours. Here you can enter your business's operating hours from opening to closing, and you can also choose to enforce operating hours. If checking the enforce operating hours box, Kennel Connection will not allow you to schedule any reservations on any of the modules if they fall outside of your operating hours. This is also going to require you to enter a start and finish time for any bookings you enter into the system. So keep that in mind if you do want to enforce operating hours. There's going to be a little bit extra data entry when creating reservations. Next to that, we have our email setup. If you're going to use Kennel Connection to send emails to customers, such as confirmation emails, vaccination emails, things like that, you'll have to have Kennel Connection set up with your current email provider to send those emails. Your outgoing server information is going to be set up here. And again, this is the outgoing server information for the email you have added to your main business information section. You'll want to contact your email provider to get this information. If you're using a basic email like Gmail or Yahoo, you can usually find that on their website or by just Googling for the information. If you have an email that is maintained through a company website, such as bluecrystalsoftware.com, for example, you want to contact whoever is managing your website to get the email information from them. Whoever you have to contact to get this information, simply tell them you need your outgoing server information and give them the field information here. They'll know exactly what you need. Here we have the option below to use the default email program when sending emails from client cards. On each client card, you're going to have an email button. If you click it, you can send an email to the customer. Checking this box enables your default email program. So if you're using Outlook Express, for example, and you click email on your customer's card, immediately it's going to open up your Outlook Express program to send that email. You have the option to include carbon copies with emails to customers, and to the right here we have the option to include additional emails for those carbon copies beyond the company email. So if you have managers with different emails you want copied on emails to customers, enter those emails here. And then below that we have CC boxes checked automatically for all email functions. So if you want to always include carbon copies on any item being sent to a customer, check this box, and anytime you send emails, if there's an option for it to be carbon copied, it will automatically be selected to have a carbon copy sent to the company email and any emails included in this section here. You'll notice under the email tab we also have tabs for each module in the system. This allows you to set up basic email services for individual modules. For boarding, for example, we have the option to send confirmation emails upon the creation of a booking in the system. We can also, again, choose the carbon copy emails to the customer for those confirmation emails. We can include vaccination status on that confirmation email. We can also display in and out time on the confirmation email. And for that confirmation email, we have 3 250-character boxes here where you can enter your own personal greeting for your company to be added to the basic confirmation information, which is going to be the reservation date, time, and if selected, vaccination status. These settings appear on a majority of these modules here, with some variations depending on the nature of the module. We also have the send thank you email on checkout, which is a new feature in Kennel Connection 6. You can find the area to put in your custom thank you message under the special emails tab. Here you can choose to create your custom message for a birthday greeting, a vaccination expiration email, or a thank you email to the customers. Next to the General tab in Business Info, we have the Bank Accounts. This is where you'll set up bank accounts if you want to track your bank accounts in Kennel Connection, as well as which bank accounts certain receipts are going towards. If you don't plan on using Kennel Connection to keep track of bank account information, simply leave this area with the default sample bank account, as the program does require a bank account in this section. You'll also find in the business information section any other additional modules or features that you're using in Kennel Connection. The setup will be here for items such as the smartphone app, for example. If you're processing credit cards, you'll set up your credit card information here. The QuickBooks Direct link is set up here, as well as your online reservation and other modules and extra features of the program. Next, right above Business Info here, I have the System Options. System Options is where you're going to enter some of your settings for how the program is going to function on a regular basis. As we open up the System Options section, the first thing you're going to notice is that we are on the Global tab. There is a Global tab, and then on the opposite end we have a Local tab. If you're using Kennel Connection on a network where you have multiple instances of Kennel Connection running off the same database, the Global tab has settings that will affect every computer in the network. If you create settings on the Local tab, those Local tab settings will only affect the computer you are currently on. So as you can see, we have a number of options here for checking how things work in Kennel Connection. I'm going to go over some of the more important and basic ones. Right at the top here, if you are going to use login IDs and passwords for your employees, so they have to log in whenever they're using the computer, you'll want to use the startup password and security features. And then with that, we always recommend using administration login as well. This will require the login ID and password of an employee with administrative access when entering areas such as System Options, the Employee section, areas with sensitive information. Setting these two options up will also allow you to keep track of who does what in the system in the audit trail, and in the audit trail on individual reservations in the program. Here we have options we can turn on for require initials on bookings. A lot of these features in the system options section are going to be self-explanatory, and many of them also have a description of what they do if you hover the mouse over the option. So things like require initials on booking, do member expiration check, these are pretty self-explanatory on what to check. Important options we have in here. If you want to use confirmation numbers when confirming appointments for customers, checking this box will automatically add confirmation numbers to those confirmation emails. Enable editable service grids on bookings. This allows you to create new exercises, feedings, or medications in the booking while you're creating it simply by typing the name of the new service into the grid, at which point it will copy it to the list section and allow you to add it to that booking. That way you do not need to exit the booking and enter information into the list section in order to create a booking with the new service. And we'll see where those items are in the list section shortly. Again, you can require an email address on client cards, including deceased pets on the Client Explorer. You have the option to mark pets as deceased. Now you have the option of whether or not you want those deceased pets to show on the Client Explorer list. If you do not check this box, deceased pets will not show on the list, but their information will still be saved in the system. Show time sheet hours in hundreds. If you have a payroll service that's using military time, then that you'll want to check. We have extra security features here, such as requiring a password change every 90 days, warning if no credit card is listed for the bookings. These are all very basic functions that are going to occur during the reservation or client information processes. If you check the box that says perform no-show check, this what will happen is every time you turn on the program, a prompt will come up asking if you want to perform a no-show check. If you do not run a no-show check every morning or every other morning, or if you have this option checked and you tend to hit no every morning, my recommendation is to uncheck it and not use it that way. You can also run a no-show check manually through the utilities section. If you're not performing no-show checks on a regular basis and you have this option turned on and people keep hitting no, no, no day after day, if someone accidentally hits yes, you're going to end up running a no-show check for the entire time that everyone has been hitting no, and that can cause a backlog in your system, especially if you have a number of customers that have not been checked out on your schedules. You can always double check what that last no-show date was by going down here to the no-show processing date. So as you can see, my last no-show processing date was 5/9. If I have this turned on and hit yes accidentally in the morning, I'm going to run a no-show process check for the entire date range from 5/9 to today. Now below these basic checkbox settings here, we have our default print options, default paper size, your default pet type. So when you're creating new pets, if you're mainly a dog facility, dog will be the type that pops up automatically when adding new pets. When your schedule weekends is set up here, as well as items such as taxing before or after a discount is applied on your invoices. If you're using the late fee processor, this is the late fee processing date, shows the last time that you processed late fees. Once again, you can choose your country here, your date format. The special booking message can be listed here. Default reminder option, yes or no. So if you are using the grooming reminder list and you're setting up customers, this will choose whether or not your customers are defaulted to being on your default report or not being on your default report. And also the checkbox here for using the waitlist booking confirmation prompt, confirming that you want to create the booking when you're saving it. I'm actually going to uncheck that. Below that, you're going to see our client card phone labels. You have slots for 5 different phone numbers on customer cards, and the labels for those can be set up here. I'm going to jump over to the local tab, and we're going to take a look at some of the local settings. The top here is mainly going to be additional settings for the individual computer you're on regarding prompts for vaccinations, pet warnings, owner warnings, etc. So this is going to control what kind of prompts appear on your screen, warning you to certain activity on a pet or customer card when you're trying to create a booking or open them up. In the middle here, we have our receipt printer set up. So if you are using a receipt printer, you'll need to choose it here, choose whether or not it's thermal, and whether or not to show purchase details on the receipt. Above here we see we have the number of copies. You also have the option to change your color scheme in Kennel Connection if you want to go for a different color or feel. Then below that, below the receipt printer option, we have options for other peripheral hardware you'll add to the program, such as barcode scanners, signature pads, poll displays, anything like that. You're going to set it up here. Your cash drawer settings are to the left here. And if you're using Pet Detect printer, Pet Detect setup is on the tab next to the general tab here, where you can choose the printers for each ribbon. I'm going to take a step back to the Invoice tab, since we're talking about receipt printers and such. The Invoice tab here is going to control how your invoices are printed out. So on the left-hand side, for example, we have whether or not to include tax registration number, and you can change the title of certain aspects of your invoices. So your invoice title, the tax title, what discounts are called, these can be modified here. You can also modify what your currency is referred to in your invoices. And below that currency setting, we have the option onto whether or not include services set up on your bookings in your invoices. So if you have exercises, medications, or feedings that you're adding to the bookings, but let's say you do not charge for any application of medications, you can simply uncheck this box, and medications that are listed on the booking will show up in your medication schedules and your reports, but will not show up on the invoice as a billable item. And that's across the board for all medications. As you'll see in the list section, you also have the ability to leave these on, yet turn off specific services that you do not want to charge for. We'll see that in a moment. Below that, we have an invoice footer or message at the bottom of the invoice. You can enter a default item here, which you can apply manually by clicking the Get Message button on your invoice, or check the automatic box here to have it apply automatically to every invoice you create. And then below that, we have automatically checked the Include Tip line for receipts on the receipt printer if you are a facility using the tip line on receipts. Below that, we have a section here dedicated to setting up our late fee policies. First, we have our terms of payment. So if you have any policies on payment date ranges, etc., you can list them here and they will appear on the invoice. Below that, we're going to be entering information for automatic late fees in the system. So if, for example, what the grace period is, whether the late payment rate is going to be a flat or percentage amount, whether you're auto charging, if you're applying the fee once or compounding it, and what you're actually calling the late fee on your invoices. One thing to keep in mind, if you do have your late fees set for a percentage and have it auto charging and compounding every certain number of days, you will want to keep a close eye on your late fees for your invoices. If you have an invoice that remains overdue, unpaid for a long period of time, those late fees are going to duplicate and increase exponentially, and you could end up with an invoice with late fees larger than the amount of the actual invoice, which can make it harder to recoup with the customer. Below that, we have using logos on reports. If you're going to have a logo on your reports or your invoices, you'll have to enter the logo here and check the box. The logo will have to be saved in the KC Pics folder in the KC6 folder. And then we have some options here for invoices requiring the employee name when invoice is created. That's the name of the invoice. That's the name of the employee creating the invoice, not the employee performing any of the services on the invoice. Showing pet ID, pet photo on the invoice, prompting for print destination when printing the invoice, showing map ID and client notes, timestamp, showing the employee name, which again is going to be the employee name that's creating the invoice, not performing services. And we have the default sales type of customer sales or cash sales when opening an invoice. You want to choose that, and this is the default for when opening a blank invoice in the system that's not attached to a customer or booking. You want to choose one that best reflects your customer flow. If you have a lot of walk-in cash only customers who are just buying retail and not in your system, you'll want to choose the cash sales option. If the majority of your customers are customers that are on file in your system, you'll want to use customer sales as your default. The module tabs between our global and local tabs affect settings directly for each individual module. There is some overlap on these, and there's a lot of settings here to go through. I'm just going to go through some of the more important ones and highlight some of the reoccurring ones that appear on most of these modules. For boarding, for example, you're going to see we have our whether you're charging by day, night, or hour. You can also charge by pet weight or by run rate. You can requiring run numbers, so bookings are not created unless a run number is selected. You're going to see on many of these modules the option to set in date or in time as blank when creating the bookings. This requires your employees to actively enter in a date and time so that they don't accidentally use a default date or time that's not when the booking was supposed to be. You're going to see specific things in here for boarding, such as allow reservation of booked runs, show vaccination warnings on the board schedule, allowing negative value for boarding packages. We have settings for the NRA system. NRA stands for No Runs Available. If you are not familiar with the No Runs Available or NRA setup, I do recommend disabling the NRA feature until such time as you have a better idea of how it works. If you do use the NRA feature, you're going to want to make sure that your NRA settings here are set up to function the way you want. Now, you're also going to see in most of these modules the ability to adjust in and out time on pet check in and out. This is especially important if you have any other settings in the system that are going to create discounts or charges to customers based on when pets come or go. In any situation like that, you're going to want to have the adjust in out time pet check in and out selected. In Kennel Connection 6 now, you have the option to prompt for an invoice at check-in or check-out. We have the option to turn the invoice prompt at check-in on, and the system's default prompt for a invoice on checkout can be turned off. You can also turn on or off the ability, the option for having a prompt come up for contracts or kennel cards at check-in, or for report cards printing at checkout. For boarding at the bottom, you're going to see settings here for occupancy. Our recommended occupancy settings are checking the first and third box, so you're counting pets that have checked out in occupancy totals, and you're including in the count pets going home at any time. If you are seeing a discrepancy in your occupancy totals at the bottom of your boarding schedule, my first recommendation is to check your settings here in the occupancy settings. And if they're not showing the way you want to, I would play with these settings a bit until you get the kind of occupancy numbers you're looking for during your scheduling process. Any modules that have a run card or groom card or daycare card of type, you're also going to have the option to choose the size of the run card or the module card. Each module tab also has a contract tab. We have a default contract in the system for each module. You can override that default contract by simply pasting your own contract into the blank box here and checking use this custom contract. When you use custom contract, Kennel Connection will still be applying the business information at the top of the contract and the customer information below that. Everything after that is going to be your custom text that appears in this box. For boarding specifically, we have a board settings tab. I go into greater detail on the board settings options in our webinar and training video on discounts and loyalty program setups in Kennel Connection. There's a lot of different settings here, but just for basic information for this webinar, you can see at the top we have options for charging or including in displays depending upon the pickup or drop-off. And then we have three separate tabs here. On this first tab for miscellaneous settings, we have settings to include a discount or a charge based on when the pet is picked up and dropped off. Whereas next to it, we have an extra charges setting tab for extra charges depending on when the pet is either picked up or dropped off, and discounts depending on when the pet is either picked up or dropped off. On grooming, you're going to see a lot of here regarding the scheduling of grooming appointments. Again, we have the same thing with vaccination warnings, not allowing more than one booking for each groomer. One of the new options we have in here is including provider name for service on invoice. So your groomers, if they're attached to the grooms, you can include their names next to the service so the customers know who is performing the services. Again, we have our defaults: adjust in and out time, setup time and as blank, prompt for invoice at creation, at check-in or check-out, and prompting for contract or groom cards. We have a default duration in the system for pets. This is the length of of the grooming booking when is created. You can adjust the default duration here, and you can also apply that duration to all pets. We have a free service program here above and beyond our discounts and loyalty programs, which you can allow a free service after a certain number of visits. The caveat on this is that the free services are set basically on what you choose here, and the awarding of those free services is going to be based solely on visits and not on what type of visits. So if you're giving a free bath and groom and this customer comes for 10 nails, they're still going to get that free bath and groom. So you want to keep that in mind if you're going to enable this frequency program. We also have the option to maintain maximum grooming schedule based either by individual groomer or by facility as a whole, or if you're using the mobile grooming option, by zone. You'll notice if I choose by groomer, it's grayed out. Same thing for zone, but if we choose by appointments, we'll be able to enter those numbers here, as that's the maximum number of appointments you want to accept on a given day for the entire facility. In situations like this, Kennel Connection will prompt you if you go over that amount, saying that you have reached the maximum bookings for that day. However, the system will not prevent you from creating a booking, so if you do want to overbook on that day, you will still be able to override that prompt. Most of these modules here are also going to have options for what shows on the schedule. So if you don't want to show breed or no indicator, you can turn those off or turn them on to show them on the schedule. The default time selected is the default time that will appear for the pet being checked in when the booking is initially created. And again, we have our card sizes. And under the grooming tab, we have our groom card format, so we can choose other features of the groom card, whether or not we want them to apply, such as customer information, pet information, and also a history of the last visits, so the groomer has an idea of what has been done to the pet beforehand. The Daycare tab, again, we have our charge by day or hour. We have whether or not to decrement daycare packages upon check-in or checkout. If you are decrementing upon checkout, or I should say the other way, we also have the ability to enable half-day packages. If you have half-day packages enabled, you'll want to decrement upon checkout. Half-day packages are deducted automatically from the system based upon the half-day package definition, which you see here. And if you are decrementing upon check-in, the system will not be able to figure out how many hours the pet has stayed, and it will not be able to apply half-day packages correctly. Beyond the basic options that we see throughout here, such as the set date and time as blank and a prompting for invoices, we can also see we're allowing negative days for packages. We have a check all in and out feature on the daycare schedule, and you can disable that here to prevent it from being accidentally used. Under our half-day package definition, we have the ability to apply half-days to full-day packages. And for more information on how daycare packages and boarding packages work, we do have a webinar and a training video on the creation and managing of packages. I do highly recommend that. In that video, we have time to go into more detail on the precise settings for those in the system options here. And again, you're going to see what you want to show on your daycare schedule and include on the daycare card. Under training, fairly less options here. Most of your basic options, showing out vaccinations, when you're prompting for your invoices, invoice creation. For pet sitting, more like training, we have a couple options specific here for pet sitting. One important one to point out: allow creation of bookings for dates that have passed. The pet sitting module is one of the few modules that does not allow you to automatically backdate appointments unless you have this box checked. And then we have options here regarding the billing of the pet sittings based on how they're scheduled. And then our special services, same thing with just the basic settings as far as adjusting in and out times, showing belonging schedules, setting the date and time, and when your invoices are being prompted for. Again, I'm not able to go over every single option in the system options to try to get this webinar under the 45-minute range or so. If you have any specific questions on a feature I might have glossed over or did not give attention to, feel free to ask at the end of the presentation, or you can always contact me afterwards. My contact information is in the chat window. I can always be emailed at scott@bluecrystalsoftware.com, or you can call me at 888-486-4343, extension 307. Finally, we're going to hit the list section here. And we do have quite a few tabs in the list section, so I'm going to be, for the most part, just giving a brief overview of what each list section does and what you'll be setting up in there. Starting with the breeds in the lower left-hand corner here. And when I say lower left-hand corner for breeds, one thing to keep in mind is when you click on a tab in the list section, the tabs move. So it can be easy to lose track of where you are if you're hitting a lot of tabs. So I'm going to start here with breeds. This is where you set up your breeds in the section. Kennel Connection comes with a number of default breeds which you can modify or delete and add to. You also have the option in this for grooming and boarding to charge by breed, and you can set up those rates here. Next to that, we have our colors tab. Again, comes with a number of default colors that you can add to, modify, or delete. Payment methods is where you'll set up how you're designating your payments in your receipts. You can add additional payment methods here to be selected in the receipts section. And you can also keep track of discount or surcharge rates being applied and check off whether they are credit card payment methods. Here we have daycare rooms. And the system is going to show daycare rooms or daycare types based on your settings and system options. I wanted to demonstrate this directly from the system options setup. Right now we see daycare rooms. If we jump back into our system options section and go to daycare and uncheck the option here for daycare has rooms, when we go back to the list section, we are now going to see that tab as daycare types. So depending on how you run your facility, you can select rooms or types, set up your rates here. Your rooms or types are going to be selected when you're creating your reservations in the daycare module. I had mentioned editable service grids previously, and I also mentioned the ability to not invoice for specific types of services. Here we have our exercise, feeding, and medication tabs. All of them look fairly the same. This is where you're going to enter your meds, your feedings, or exercises. Again, if you have editable service grid selected, you can simply type in a new exercise, feeding, or medication when you're creating your booking under that service window, and it will automatically be applied to the list section where you can go back later and make modifications. You'll notice on all three of these, we have the not invoiceable option. So we can choose individual services that we do not want to invoice for without having to put a blanket no invoice on the entire service type. So heart pills, for example, will not show up on the invoice, even though they will show up on the schedule and on our medication lists when those are run. Exercises has two additional options. We have the option to add to report card, and we have the option to add to touchscreen list. Touchscreens allow you to add a limited number of special services, and those special services are created in the exercise section to be applied during the touchscreen process. Beyond those, we have our notices. Certain reports in Kennel Connection will give you the option to choose a preset note to add as notice to add to the email that's being sent through that report. Those notices are set up here. There are a number of 5 notices you can set up. So for example, here I have the setup for my reservation reminder list for boarding. And when I run that, I choose notice number 1, which includes this message in the reservation reminder for the boarding module. If you're running the boarding module, you'll definitely need to use the runs and run sizes tabs. This is where you set up obviously your runs and run sizes. You'll want to set your run sizes first. The system comes with large, medium, and small as the default. You don't need to use those sizes, and they don't actually have to be a size. That's just the terminology we use for the system. So if you have suites, you can call them that. And this is where you'll create your run sizes, the rate that applies to them, the type of pet, and any special multi-pet rates that apply to those as well. Then after you create your run sizes, you're going to create your individual runs. And for each run you create, you're going to attach it to a specific run size. New in Kennel Connection 6, previously runs and run sizes were only designated towards boarding modules, but you can now use runs on your daycare, training, or grooming modules as well. As you're creating your runs, you'll select which modules they appear on. So you can actually share runs between two modules. If you have a facility that has a boarding and daycare and you tend to use your kennels or cages or whatever you're using between the two modules depending on your current business flow. Next to run sizes, we have sources. When you're creating new customers in the system, you'll have the option to choose where they learned about your facility, who they were referred by. Those referral sources will be saved here. You can also add additional ones to choose from that drop-down menu. Other services that are added to bookings are created here. These will be billed through the other services or other groom inventory item, but their basic setup that you normally see in the inventory section occurs here in the other services tab. So you can see here we set up our other service along with the tax information, any kind of commissionable information, QuickBooks account information, etc. Next to that we have special rates. These are special rates you can apply towards individual days of the week or for any holiday or peak seasons that are set up on the monthly calendar. You also have the option now to include what that additional rate is actually called when it's applied to the invoice. If you're using the training module, training classes are created here in the Training Classes tab and are then selected from the training module when creating the training appointment. Vaccinations that are tracked on the pet card are initially created here. You'll create your vaccination, choosing whether it's required or whether it's feline, choosing how long it takes for that vaccination to expire so you can keep track of when expirations occur for pets for vaccinations. And we also have specific options here for our rabies 1 year and 3 year. If you have multiple vaccinations of the same type but with different date ranges, you can always, and they're required. In this example, we have a rabies 1 year and a rabies 3 year that are both required. What you can do is set them both up in the system so anything that's marked as required is going to immediately show on a pet card when that pet is created and will have to have information put in for it. But you can have the rabies 1 year and 3 year on your pet card and mark one of them as exempt on the pet card so only one will create an alert when the expiration date has passed, or if there is no expiration date. Next to that, we have our vets location. So if you're keeping track of veterinarians in your system, they'll be entered here. If a vet that's not in the list section is added to the the pet card, it'll ask you if you want to automatically add it to the list section, and at what point you can then come back later and add additional information if desired. If you are charging for your boarding by pet weight, the information for what prices are applied towards the weight ranges can be entered here. Then we have zip codes. Zip codes entered on customer cards. If they don't exist here, Kennel Connection will prompt you if you want to save them. They'll be saved here. This is especially important if you're using the mobile grooming module, as your zone setup is going to be applied to your zip codes. Kennel Connection comes with 5 default pet types: bird, cat, dog, ferret, steak. Cat and dog are the only ones you cannot delete or modify. Those are defaults hardwired into the system. Beyond that, you can remove the others and you can add any additional pet types you want to add to the system. Cat and dog are also important towards your occupancy totals if you're using Kennel Connection to track your occupancy and boarding. So if you replace cat or dog with feline, or canine or anything like that, your occupancy totals will not be accurate. So if you are using occupancies, you need to stick to the cat and dog designations that are already set up in the program. Next to that, we have pet sitting types. Again, this is where you're going to set up your pet sitting services for the pet sitting module. In Kennel Connection 5, we had daycare packages and boarding packages. In Kennel Connection 6, we now have daycare, boarding, pet sitting, grooming, and other packages. Besides training, which is the one module that currently does not have package options based on the way that module is programmed, every other module, and indeed practically everything in the inventory section, can have a package created for it. Starting with the basics here, we have our daycare packages that are set up here. Then we have our boarding packages that are created here, pet sitting packages, all created roughly the same way, our grooming packages, and then the other packages. Grooming and other are created by selecting the item from the inventory section using the browse button. We do have a module specifically, again, as I stated before, on creating and managing packages, and I highly recommend that module, that training video or webinar, if you're looking for more information on those aspects of the program. Next to daycare packages, we have states, countries, and zones. Zones being for if you're using the mobile grooming option. We have cell service providers. If you're going to be sending text messages to your customers through the customer card, you'll need to have their cell provider listed in the system. We have a number of cell providers here as a default that you can apply. If your customer has a cell provider that we do not have the information for here, you will have to get that information from the customer or the cell provider. We don't supply additional information for that. We just maintain a basic list of the most popular ones or most prevalent ones. And then we already covered the packages, and when I skip over to the end, if you're using the special services module, you'll be set up your special services to apply to that module here. And that's pretty much the end of the list section. So as a quick overview, during this demonstration, we've gone through the business info section, showing where to set up your basic business info, including the ability to set up other options in the program, such as smartphone apps, credit card processing, QuickBooks Direct Link, online reservation, etc. From there, we went to the system options section, where you're going to set system options that control how reservations are created or what options are there for them, and how the program is going to function under certain situations. And then from there, we went to the list section, where we're going to set up most of our data entry as far as types of information that are be available to the system, such as your breeds, your rates that are set up for your boarding, daycare, etc., and items such as packages, services, anything else. Most of the items in the system that you're going to acquire by selecting it from a drop-down list is going to be set up here in the list section. These three sections are very important to the setup of the program, and these are three of the 5 sections that you're going to want to set up in your program before initially using it and maintaining throughout the usage of the program in your facility.